This is Karen Urbeck, the archivist and digital collection specialist at Vizcaya Museum and Gardens. I'm here interviewing Enid Pinkney. It is October 27th, 2020, and it is about 12:30 in the afternoon. So Enid, thank you for inviting me to your home.
Thank you for coming.
Can you tell me your full name and your date and place of birth to start?
My name is Enid Curtis Pinkney. I was born October 15th, 1931.
And you were born here in Miami?
I was born in Miami in Overtown.
Overtown, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what are the names of your parents and your siblings?
My mother's name was Lenora Curtis. She was a Clark before she was a Curtis. Lenora Clark Curtis.
Okay.
And my father was Henry Curtis.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any siblings?
Well, yes. My father had been married before and had 4 children before he married my mother, and his first wife died. And after her death, he married my mother, and then there were 2 of us with my mother, and I was the oldest one. I was born in 1931, and my brother Israel Curtis was his name. He was born in 1933, and he was born at 4609 Pine Tree Drive on Miami Beach, where they were living on the premises of the people that they worked for, because they lived up north. The man's name was Albert Pick. He was a hotel magnate. He owned a lot of hotels.
Okay.
And when my brother was born, they refused to put Miami Beach on his birth certificate. Why? Because he was black. Because no black people were supposed to be living on Miami Beach.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's the story about his birth.
So which location was put on his birth certificate?
They put Miami, Florida on the birth certificate.
Okay. Did your parents, they were born in the Bahamas?
My mother was born in Exuma, Bahamas, and my father was born in Cat Island.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And can you tell me more about that? I know that there were a lot of Bahamian immigrants who came to Miami and then would go back and then come back, and that there was a lot of movement there.
Yes. Well, my father was a farmer in the Bahamas and a sponger. He used to dive for sponges. That during that time, that was supposed to be good money. There was a song out, "Sponger Money Never Dies."
Oh, really?
Yeah,
what do you do with the
that was one of the popular songs I remember coming up. Of course, when he came to Miami, he didn't have any land to farm, so he went into gardening. And because he knew about growing things and about the earth, so he went into gardening. And now my mother was a Clark, and her people were from Exuma, and my great grandmother owned a lot of property in Exuma. They called it Clark Land. Yep. And my mother used to talk about that all the time. She used to say that we own property from sea to sea. But it didn't register with me because by being born here, I couldn't see any black people owning any oceanfront property. And especially since, my brother was born on Miami Beach and they wouldn't even put Miami Beach on his birth certificate.
Yeah.
So it didn't register with me. But then after she passed, everything she said got to be more significant. And so she used to talk about picking cocoa plums, and I didn't even know what a cocoa plum was. So I contacted my uncle in Exuma, and I wanted to walk the roads she used to walk. I wanted to pick a cocoa plum. I wanted to do some of the things that she did as a child. And so I told him that I wanted to come to Exuma. I wanted to visit Exuma. And
About what time period was this?
let's see, when was that? Now that's a good question, because that was I'm trying to remember when she passed, because my father passed in 1967, so it was in the 1970s that she passed. So I went to Exuma, and it was like a spirit got a hold of me and said, "You've got to do something," because it was so welcoming. They were so happy to see me, and I felt so warm. I felt the warmth of the people and the relatives, and I said, I thought, and I said, I've got to do something here in Exuma as a monument to my mother, who came from this place and who worked as a maid, made $1 a day plus car fare, and saw to it that I got an education and helped me to become who I am. And so I talked with my uncle about the Clark land that she talked about. I said, my mother always talked about Clark land. She said, the Clarks have a lot of land. And then when I saw it in a book that Dr. Whittington Johnson wrote, and so he said, yes, it's true. And I said, well, I would like to have some of that land.
Yeah.
And I want to build a house on the land, and as a tribute to my mother and what she was able to come to the United States and do for my brother and I. And so he said, okay, he said, we have a family council that it has to go before. And so they have to discuss it. But he said, I will be your presenter. And he did that. And they decided to give me some land.
Nice.
They gave it to me. And so I built that house right there. You see the house?
Okay.
That's the house that I built. And I called it Villanora in honor of my mother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Did you live there for long?
No, I really never lived there. I just go there sometimes. But it's been a long time since I've been there because my husband was sick. He was on dialysis. And they don't have that service there on the outer island like that. And so we could never go because, he had to go on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And so you just, you couldn't travel after he got sick. But we used to go to, vacation. And it was just so nice. In one of the books, in the book that's coming out, it says, one of the saying in there is that Exuma is the only place you can go to heaven without going to church or dying.
That's amazing. And do you agree?
Yes.
So why did your parents leave then? Why did they come here?
Well, they came here to a better way of living, a better life, and so that they could experience what America was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just, and it's, my father, they were Bahamians.
Yeah.
Even though they came here, they lived as Bahamians.
Okay.
Because the foods that we ate,
Mm-hmm.
the pigeon peas and rice, the conch,
Yep.
the various kinds of seafood, fish, and even with the desserts, the coconut candy.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the Bahamian foods and the Bahamian culture. Even my grandmother came to stay with us when my parents were living on Miami Beach, and they were very particular about who we associated with. They were very strict. They were very strict.
In what way?
Well, like if someone wanted to come we had a fence around our yard, and someone wanted to come to play with us, they wanted to know, who are you? Who are your parents?
Okay.
What church do you go to? You don't go to church? Oh, no, you can't come in here. You have to, they have to know your pedigree, because they just wanted to be very particular about transmitting the values. And so they didn't want us to go astray from what they were teaching us, to be influenced by people who did not accept our values.
Sure.
And so they were very, very strict about our company, and they wanted us to participate in various things in school, be very active in church. They were very active in church. Church was very important. School was very important. Education was very important.
Yeah.
All of the things that you needed to do to become successful. And my mother liked for me to participate in whatever was going on at the church and at the school. I had to learn a poem or learn a piece to play on the piano. I remember, I think it was, I got up one time saying I was going to play this piece by Tchaikovsky,
Okay.
Yeah. But it was very simple. It wasn't something very, But I took piano lessons. Mr. Leslie, my piano teacher, was from Cat Island. My father knew him, and he had studied in England.
Oh, okay.
So he came and he taught me piano for 25 cents a lesson.
Oh.
And then on Saturday mornings, he had music theory lessons. We went to a lady's house, Mrs. Wheeler. And so we learned how to read notes and to sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Yeah.
We had to learn, and he'd point to a note, and you'd have to know the sound of that note. And then he also taught us Spanish. And not that I remember any of it now, but he taught us Castilian Spanish.
Okay.
Because he said that was the proper Spanish. the Spanish that they speak in Spain, not the localized Spanish you hear, right?
Yeah.
So they were very particular about our environment, and they were very protective of us, and they wanted us to, set high goals.
Now, when you said before that they were very Bahamian and Bahamian culture, these are the things that how would you describe that? This protectiveness and the high achievement.
Yes, all of that. Yes, all of that, and the foods, the religious aspect of it, very religious. All of that is a part of it. Yes.
Now, did you feel very different from your peers, from other kids in class, or did you have a sense that you were being raised differently?
Well, in a sense, yes, because some of the other kids didn't like us. I remember there was a girl who lived like 2 doors down from us, and she wanted to beat me up. Yeah, and so but my mother had taught me that young ladies don't fight because you'll disgrace your family, and she kept intimidating me, saying things, and she wanted to beat me up because I didn't know how to fight. I didn't have that kind of mentality, and so she pushed me into some bushes. There was a cherry, these little orange, little red cherries that grow on the sticker bushes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They get everywhere. And
those stickers, they stick you. Yeah, like thorns.
Yep.
Okay. That's what she...
She knew how to fight.
she pushed me in there. And so, and all the kids, because the kids knew she was bullying me. So the other kids said, hit her back. They wanted to see a fight. I knew they would try to psych me up to get beat up. So, or beaten up.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't hit her back because my mother said young ladies don't fight.
Okay.
So I'm in betwixt what to do. So there were some other kids who knew where my brother was, and he had a quick temper.
Okay.
They knew. Now he was taught, young men don't hit young ladies either.
Sure.
He was taught that, but he didn't pay too much attention to that. When they came to him and they told him that I had gotten all beaten up, and this girl had beaten me up so, and she had scratched me up, and they made it, sound worse than she had done. To make sure that he got good and angry.
Yeah.
So when he came there and he beat her up.
Ooh.
he hit her.
Wow. Yeah.
And see, that's what they wanted, because they wanted to see the fight, So they wanted somebody to fight, and they sort of get a big kick.
Yeah.
They got to fight. They got to fight. So.
How old were you?
At that time, I was in elementary. I was going to Dunbar School.
Okay.
So I don't know. I might have been in the 4th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
9, 10.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. but that's how we were brought up, and but my father was very principled. Although he was a gardener, but he was also a minister. And one night he was pastoring a church in Carver's Ranch. They call it West Park now. And one night he was coming home from church, and he was stopped by the police. And so they said that he was driving with bright lights.
Oh, like his high beams. Okay.
Like, yeah, so they ordered him out of the car. And, well, he had been, to citizenship school to become a citizen. So he had studied the Constitution. He used to sit us down and go over the Constitution with us. So he went to Dunbar Elementary School in the evenings when he got off from work. And he went to citizenship school to become a citizen.
Okay.
So he was an expert on the Constitution, and he was teaching us about the Constitution. He said we needed to learn about the Constitution. And so when the cop ordered him out of the car, he got out of the car, he had his hat on.
Yeah.
So the cop said, take your hat off. So he asked the policeman, he said, well, what law am I violating by keeping my hat on? And the policeman was incensed that he would question him. You just do what I tell you to do. You don't question me, That was his attitude.
Yeah.
So the police slapped him, knocked his hat off.
Oh.
And we were on State Road 9, coming home from church.
Oh, so you were in the car too?
I was in the car. My brother was in the car. My mother was in the car.
Okay.
We were all in the car. And so my father stooped down and picked his hat up and put his hat back on his head. And so the police was really incensed then. So he said, well, we're going to have to take you to jail. So my father said, fine. He said, but I know I'm allowed to make one telephone call. He said, and I'm going to call my boss, Mr. Albert Pick. And so then the police went to my mother and tried to get my mother to calm my father down. And so my father told the police. Now this is in the 40s. We're talking about the 40s. My father told the police, said, don't speak to her. She has nothing to do with this. You deal with me.
Okay.
So he said, well, you give us no other alternative because you're insubordinate. So they put him in the police car and they took him away and they left us on State Road 9. They didn't care how we got home or whether we got home or not. They just left us on State Road 9. So my brother said that he was going to drive the car home. So my mother said, no, you're not, because you don't have any license.
Did your mother drive?
So, no, my mother couldn't drive.
Okay.
And I couldn't drive.
Yeah.
So we're out there on State Road 9, not knowing what to do, because nobody had a cell phone or anything that. That was, So we just sitting out there in the dark. It was dark, pitch black.
And how did you feel? Were you crying or worried or?
Well, we were worried because we didn't know how we were gonna get home.
Yeah.
So and my mother wouldn't let my brother drive, so we were stuck. So then we looked and we saw a police car coming toward us. So my mother said, "See, they're sending some police a police car to see about us, So when we looked, and the police car stopped right across from us, because we were headed south, and they were coming back because they had taken him away and they were bringing him back.
Okay.
So we noticed it was the same two policemen that took him away, and my father sitting in the back seat. So they asked him if they gave him a chance, would he learn how to respect an officer? So he said, if an officer slaps me and knocks my hat off, I'm doing the same thing. And my mother thought she would die. Because all she wanted him to do was say whatever they wanted him to say and get out of there. Mm-hmm. But he refused. Mm-hmm. He refused to do what they wanted him to do. Mm-hmm. But when they found out who he worked for, mm-hmm. because, Mr. Pick liked him.
Yeah.
He was honest.
Mm-hmm.
He never stole any of his stuff. And he came from Chicago because he owned the Congress Hotel in Chicago and everywhere. All his stuff was wherever he left it. Mm-hmm. So, and in fact, my father was able to get other Bahamians jobs with his friends.
Yeah.
Because he said he's honest. That was one of, mm-hmm. and you don't have to worry about your things. You could stay. They had, the servants' quarters. That's where he stayed. And so he refused to do what they wanted him to do, but they still let him go. Mm-hmm. They let him go, and then he got in the car and drove home. That's how he got home.
Wow.
But I've just seen him stand up for principles. Mm-hmm. And so that has had a great influence on my life. Mm-hmm. And, why I do some of the things that I do, because I just think that there's no other way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think that if you didn't have someone to call, it would have gone differently?
If what?
If you didn't have Mr. Pick to call, that it might have been different?
It might have, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Did he ever discuss it with you after? I mean,
No.
I know this was when, parents wouldn't necessarily talk to kids and explain things.
No.
But...
No, he just did what he was going to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Was that the only time something like that happened that you're aware of?
Well, no, even, you know what? See, even when Mr. Pick would come mm-hmm. from Chicago, he used to like to see us, to see how we'd grown and everything,
yeah.
And we would recite poetry mm-hmm. for him, or we would sing, or we would do a drama, and something we learned in school. And I remember one time they asked us to dance, and he said no. My father said no, they don't dance. And I got nervous because I said, that's his boss. He got this, that was a good job. He could get fired for not doing what the boss wanted him to do, Yeah. And he said, oh, okay, all right. And it was okay. It was okay. Another thing, I was president of the student council. So they used to, back in that day, in the 40s, they used to have Brotherhood Week. Mm-hmm. This was before they started having Black History Month.
Okay.
And so there was a fellow who was a member of the Unitarian Church. Mm-hmm. I don't know how long you've been in Miami, but there was a Reverend Joseph Barth that was the pastor of the Unitarian Church. Mm-hmm. This was a white church, mm-hmm. but they were always, trying to do things with integration. And so they had a radio broadcast, Brotherhood Week mm-hmm. radio broadcast. And they asked for a representative from the Black community, a student. Mm-hmm. And the principal recommended that I participate in that.
Okay. This was in high school?
Yes, I was in high school. And so we had the broadcast. And then they burned a cross in front of the house in Coral Gables mm-hmm. of the white fellow who invited me.
Oh my goodness.
to participate on the broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And my uncle worked for the Herald during that time, and about 2:00 in the morning, because we were all asleep, we got this telephone call saying that my name was going to be in the paper the next day, the Herald, about a cross burning. And my father was on the phone talking to my uncle, and we didn't know what he was saying. So, but when he got off the phone, and we took the Herald and we took the News, took both papers. He said, my Uncle Robert, he said that Enid's name's going to be in the paper tomorrow about a cross burning. So we had to wait till the paper came to see what they said. So yeah, and it was true. So then people started talking about that, and people in our neighborhood, and they were saying, her parents need to stop her from. There was a teacher by the name of Miss Marie Roberts, and she was one of those who was going around meeting with white people, with various groups in integrated meetings.
Yeah.
Because it was against the law. You know how people start talking. Like I told them they needed. I knew this was going to happen.
Okay,
Yeah. I told. Yeah, he shouldn't let her go. He needed to stop her from going around there.
Being blamed. So you were being blamed for this.
Yeah. Going around there with Miss Roberts to these white people meeting.
Okay.
And they were telling my parents that they need, especially my father, that he needs to stop me from doing that. So he said no. He said, I'm not going to stop her from doing that. He said, I'm not going to let them intimidate me like that. If she wants to do it, if she wants to go to the integrated meetings, she can go. So, he did things like that. He supported, what I was doing, and it was the principle of the thing, and he didn't see it that way. He didn't agree with them. And so when another thing when they used to have what they called the Florida Chain of Missions, and they had all these missionaries that came from all over the world, and they used to have a all-day meeting at the Miami Women's Club.
Okay.
And so our principal and the same as Marie Roberts, they were always knowing about these meetings. So they wanted a group of students to go to the meeting at the Miami Women's Club. And so they told them, well, they could come to the meeting, but they can't eat. They can't have lunch, because they had a luncheon as a part of the meeting.
Yeah.
So the principal said, oh, that's fine. They don't need to eat. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because they can come over, they can come back to the school to eat.
Okay.
Now that meant, we walked from Booker T. Washington High School over to the Miami Women's Club.
Yeah.
We were there for the morning session, and when it was time to eat, we walked back over to Booker T. Washington High School, had lunch, and then we walked back to the meeting for the afternoon session.
How long was the walk?
Oh, it's Booker T. Washington, which is still there.
Yeah.
It's 1200 Northwest 6th Avenue. So we walked from 6th Avenue, Northwest 6th Avenue, to Bayshore Drive.
Oof, okay. That's a long walk.
Hey, I can't walk around in the house now.
Oh my goodness. Oh boy, my glasses keep fogging.
But again, that's that Bahamian spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That he had, and that my mother had, and my mother, her emphasis was to take pride in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
She took pride in herself, the way you dress,
Mm-hmm.
the way you present yourself,
Mm-hmm.
the way you speak,
Mhm.
and just how you carry yourself.
Mhm.
And so that was very important to her.
They both sound like they were very confident and very self-possessed and self-controlled, and very sure of who they were.
Yeah, and so that's the reason why, even though the laws tried to make you feel inferior,
Mm-hmm.
like I never felt inferior, because it was an important thing because I was always told, you're just as good as anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe better.
And you believed it. Oh, that's wonderful. Now, do you think that was your parents, or do you think
My
that
parents.
was the Bahamian? Do you think that?
Both.
Do you think all Bahamians?
Yes, yeah,
That way?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because it's yes, it's a difference.
Mhm.
There is a difference.
Mhm.
I think that the American blacks were really intimidated a lot
Mhm.
by the white man and what he could do, and you have to take that into consideration also,
Sure.
when you're afraid
Mhm.
of what could happen to you.
Mhm.
You try to accommodate the people who you don't want to do those things to you.
Sure.
And the difference is that when you stand up to them. But what I found out at an early age
Mhm.
is that if you stand up, they'll back down.
Oh. Okay.
Because when I saw how, my father's boss said, okay, they don't have to dance. Okay,
Mhm.
that was okay.
Yeah.
He respected as a religion. People will respect you
Mhm.
if you respect yourself.
Yeah.
You don't have to accommodate what they want for you.
Mhm.
And so that's like bullying you.
Yeah.
That's another form of bullying.
Yeah. Trying to make someone do what you want them to.
Right, and make them feel inferior,
Mhm.
so you can get what you want,
Yeah.
or you can manipulate them,
Mhm.
and that has never been a part of my upbringing.
Mhm.
And so I think that's why I've been able to get things done
Okay.
as I have, because with working with the restoration of the Hampton House, that was a big project,
Mhm.
and also with stopping developers from building on the Black abandoned Lemon City Cemetery.
Mhm.
And when I got into that, I found out that my grandfather was buried there.
Oh.
I didn't know that when they first came and called it to my attention
Mhm.
that these developers were going to put 3 affordable housing
Mhm.
units on this property,
Yeah.
and we found out that it was a cemetery. The city of Miami
Yeah.
had given them permission to develop that property,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
so to fight the city of Miami
Mhm.
and the developers with money, and they had lawyers,
Mhm.
and I was like, David, with a slingshot.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But we won. We compromised to the extent that one of the buildings, when it was called to my attention, was halfway up. So we let them finish that.
Okay.
There's one building on the cemetery.
Yeah.
But we made them move the other two buildings and put them someplace else to, in respect to the dead. And
Yeah.
I just felt that my grandfather had something to do with the guidance and the leading of me in that fight to preserve the Lemon City Cemetery. And so now there's a monument with 523 names of black people that were buried there.
Yeah.
And then we found two other names that we put when we reinterred the human bones
Yeah.
that were dug up from there.
Mm-hmm.
We put those other names on the headstone
Okay.
of the when we reinterred the bones. So, getting into all these fights with government, even with preserving Virginia Key Beach, and because I just learned that you have to stick your neck out there and stand up for something.
Yeah.
And you'll be respected.
Now tell me, were there gender expectations that were different? Like often women are not encouraged to be leaders. Men are expected to be leaders and women are expected not to be. Was there anything like that or no?
No, in fact,
It doesn't
women
sound like
are
this.
encouraged to be leaders. In the black community, women are encouraged to be leaders. And black men are stifled.
Oh.
I remember when they were integrating the schools.
What grade were you in?
No, I was a counselor.
Oh, that's right. You were. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And they had a counselor at Edison, but she had been an assistant principal at North Dade. So she was suing the school board for demoting her because of integration. And
Okay.
so, and I think she won a case. So they needed a counselor.
Okay.
And there was a male counselor from Booker T. Washington that they could have transferred in there. But they selected me, and I didn't have any experience. I had just gotten my master's from Barry,
Okay.
And, that's what the men have to go through sometimes. They would prefer a woman in leadership than a man. And so that's I think that that's still one of the problems that we're subtly dealing with. Yeah.
What do you think the solution is?
Now that's a good question. What is the solution?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure it's not easy.
No, because see, the people in power have to have a change in because I remember Dr. Gilbert Porter, who was assistant superintendent. He said the same people who were administering segregation are now administering integration.
Yeah.
So and we have the same problems. And even now, we still see that we have some of the same problems.
Yeah.
So what is the solution? This goes back to the question that you're asking. What is the solution? The solution, I think, is for people to be fair and to give everybody their just due and to try to get rid of their prejudices.
Yeah.
Now, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, that's a long road.
Because it's almost like transmitted, inherited, and even though things have changed and things have improved, you still have vestiges. It's like vestiges on all sides. You have black people who still feel intimidation from white people, especially as they are moving up the ladder, because they don't want to be offensive and lose their status. So they could be stronger in getting things done, but they don't want to be offensive. And then on the other hand, you have white people who still have stereotypes about black people. So as long as we have these problems, we don't have a solution. And we just have to work on it and try to educate people as best we can. One day at a time.
One day at a time. Yeah, one person at a time.
Yeah, one person at a time. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about your family's relationship to Vizcaya.
Okay, as I said, my father was a gardener, and he worked there. And he told a story one time about being on a break while they were a group of his buddies, and I guess there was a lot of Bahamians that worked there too. And he said that this white man came along, and he had on a straw hat, didn't look like anybody in particular, So he said he started questioning them. They were sitting under a tree having lunch, and he said he spoke to them, said, "Hello, boys," and he asked them how they were doing and everything, and what they were doing, and he said, "Well, who do you work for?"
The man asked them.
The man, yeah. So he said, somebody named Deering. And so he said, "Well, have you ever seen him?" He said, "No." And he said, and they, because they looked at him as if he wasn't anybody important, the way he was dressed.
Yeah.
And he said after he got through asking them various questions, and they answered the questions and everything, and he said, "Well, nice talking to you boys." He said, "And I want you to know I'm James Deering." He said they all got up. Everybody went back to work.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's. I remember that story. Yeah, because they.
Was that the only time your dad talked to him or saw him much? I guess after that he knew who he was.
After that, there was no more talking. They just.
No.
After that, they went back to their jobs. Yeah.
So how long did your dad work at Vizcaya?
He worked there. He worked there. Like when he first came to the United States.
Which was when?
Early. He came my father came in 1910.
Okay. So they were still building this guy then.
Huh?
They hadn't even started to build yet.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he came in 1910.
So he worked, he helped build it then?
Well, I don't think he did any of the building. He just worked on the yard. I don't think he had any skills for building that I know of. Yeah. He worked there until he, got some jobs on Miami Beach.
Okay. And did he go back or?
No,
No,
because he
stayed.
he stayed working on Miami Beach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So about what time was that?
Well,
Let's see if
now my brother, I know my brother was born in 1933.
Okay. That's a long time.
But it might have been before then because they already had a job working there. So it was it was before then.
Okay.
But that's, yeah.
And what are your memories of Vizcaya from when you were young? Did you ever visit? Or?
Yeah. It was a place to go for a field trip.
Okay.
From school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, in later years, I remember, did you know Dennis Fruitt?
Was he with Parks?
He worked there.
Yeah.
He helped me with setting up some workshops for the Hampton House.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He helped.
Yeah. Now, did you bring students through when you were at the schools?
No, I never brought kids there myself, but I knew, it was a place for field trips.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So not a part of every day, not somewhere where you interacted a lot.
Not everyday kind of thing. This guy was special.
Yeah. It still
That was a special thing. And then too, I went there. People had weddings, for special occasions. People had special occasions. And Vizcaya was always special. Yeah.
But would you go and feel like my father helped build part of this or helped produce part of this?
Yeah, I've always felt that he had a hand in it, especially in the gardening area. Yeah. That's I think something to be proud of, and as a pioneering experience, Yeah.
Pioneering how?
Early people who came to Miami and like a contribution to Miami, because a lot of times people think of contributors as being educators and people who do what they consider outstanding things, not the menial jobs.
Sure. Although one of the things that I've read too is a lot of the Bahamian workers brought knowledge of plants and how to grow things and horticulture that people who came from the north didn't really know this climate that well, but the Bahamian immigrants did know the climate because it was very similar to the Bahamas.
Right, and they also knew, one of the things, they knew how to plant in, even though you had a lot of coral rock.
Yeah.
And they knew how to grow various plants and vegetables through coral rock. Yeah. So, and Thelma Peters talks about that in her book, in Lemon, even in her Lemon City book.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what does she say?
She talks about the Bahamians and their knowledge of just what you just got through saying.
Okay.
That they knew how to save plants, because a lot of the people were saying, "Oh, this wouldn't grow here" or something like that, and they could prove that it could. Yeah, so that's in her book.
Yeah.
And she talks about blacks in Lemon City.
Mm-hmm. And was that handed down to you and your brother? Are you a gardener? Do you
No.
keep a garden? No?
No. My brother, yes. My brother, yeah. Let me tell you about my
Of
brother.
course, yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up and with the gardening, because see, I forgot that
Okay.
when you were asking me about examples.
Mhm.
One time when my father was working on Miami Beach. This was occasion he was working on Miami Beach, and he had some extra work that he needed help with.
Mhm.
So he wanted my brother to come over to help him. So, my brother had to go to Boy Scout meeting. He went to he was a member of a Boy Scout troop at Mount Zion Baptist Church, because our church didn't have a Boy Scout troop.
Okay.
So my father told him to catch the bus after Boy Scout meeting and come over to the beach,
Okay.
because he knew how to do that.
Yeah.
So he caught the bus, and he got off the bus on Pine Tree Drive, and then the cops stopped him.
Okay.
So they wanted to see his ID.
How old is your brother? He's a teenager?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and he didn't have a police. They call it a police card. You're supposed to have a police card. So he didn't have a police card. So he asked him where was he going. So he said he was going to his father. So that sounded strange.
Yeah.
That didn't sound right. Something wrong with that. So he told him to get in the car. So he got in a police car, and he said, well, where's your father? He said, 4609 Pine Tree Drive. So they took him to 4609 Pine Tree Drive. And because nobody was there with my mother and father, because, Mr. Pick was in Chicago. So when my father said, look, he thought he got in trouble or did something. He saw the police bringing him in there. So my father said, well, what's wrong? What did he do? He said he was coming to his father. He said, that's correct. He said, I'm his father. We can laugh at this stuff now.
Yeah.
And he told the police that he told him to come because he has to help him do some work.
Yeah.
Help me with things that he has to do. So he's there legitimately.
Yeah.
He said, well, he didn't have any ID card, so we didn't know whether he was supposed to be over here. Because then they see a black person, especially, because he was coming like when everybody's supposed to be going home,
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he's walking down the street trying to get to 4609 Pine Tree Drive, so they were suspicious.
Yeah.
And so they brought him, and he went with my parents to the servants' quarters.
Yeah.
And was there for the next day to start working.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did your brother respond to that? Was he angry? Was he like how?
No. He was a little afraid, but he knew he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
So it should turn out okay. But then you never know.
Yeah.
Because these policemen can come up with say something that didn't happen or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. It's intimidating.
It's intimidating. Yeah. Yes. Because they made him get in the police car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who wants to get in the police car?
No, I know. Who wants that? Yeah. Nobody wants to see the lights behind them when they're driving.
Who
Yeah.
wants to go in the police car?
Yeah, nobody. Oh, boy. Well, we haven't even gotten to your education. We haven't even gotten to your school.
Oh.
Do you feel like you want to keep going?
No.
I mean.
Oh, my school? Okay.
Yeah, I have your Booker T, Washington
Oh, yes.
High, 49.
Yeah.
Talladega College,
Yes.
53. And Barry University, 67.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to have regular meetings, the class of 49, my class,
Yeah.
because we always thought we were the smartest ones in the school. We were-
Yeah. I'm sure it's true.
and we were always bragging about our accomplishments.
Mhm.
And we met once a month, but a lot of us have died out, and a lot of us don't get around like we used to, so they stopped meeting. But we really enjoyed our. I enjoyed high school.
Mhm.
I don't know. Let's see. I have a picture somewhere with Joe Louis.
Oh.
Yeah, when Joe Louis came to Miami, a lot of the celebrities, Mr. Williams used to like to invite them to come out to the school to speak to the students.
Okay.
And so we got the opportunity to get Joe Louis to come out to Booker T. Washington High School.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like at the last minute,
Mm-hmm.
nobody knew it was going to happen.
Okay.
So he was trying to pull an assembly together.
Mm-hmm.
And so he asked me, I was president of student council, and we had raised $100 for band uniforms. Back then, the school had to raise the money for band uniforms. So he got the band together, and then he got the chorus together, and the band played in the assembly, and the chorus sang. And then he told me to present him with this check for $100 for the band uniform.
Okay.
And well, he had asked somebody else to do it, but he didn't like how they did it, so then he asked me.
Mm-hmm.
So because he was trying to get some money out of Joe Louis.
Okay.
So and Mr. Williams was something else. He told the fellow that he asked, he said, "Oh no, you go sit down." And then he called my name, and I was nervous. So he told me, he said, "Now you present this to me in such a way that he'll understand we were raising money for the band uniforms."
Mm-hmm.
So and he said, "And I don't have time to tell you what to say." He was like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "Oh my God, if I mess up on this, he's gonna be mad."
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about what I was gonna say. I tried to get it together to make it emphatic and make it sound inviting.
Yeah.
And so I presented the check to Mr. Williams, and then he introduced Joe Louis. And Joe Louis got up and he admonished us to stay in school and get an education. And he said, because he didn't do it, but he wants us to do it.
Yeah.
And he gave us a nice little talk. And then he said, and I understand you're raising money for the band uniform. He said he raised $100. He said, "I'm going to double that, and I'm going to give you $200.
Nice.
So everybody applauded, and that was good,
Mm-hmm.
So then we had to figure out, well, how we going to get the $200? So the teacher, our teacher, the student council sponsor, she was trying to find out from him when could we pick up the check. So he said something about being at the Mary Elizabeth Hotel.
Okay.
So after school, we drove over to the Mary Elizabeth Hotel, and he wasn't there.
No.
So then somebody said, they thought he went to the Carver.
Mm-hmm.
So we drove over to the Carver Hotel, and he wasn't there. So then somebody said, no, I think he went to the Sir John. So we drove over to the Sir John, and he wasn't there. Then somebody said, no, I think he went to the Dorsey Hotel. So we went to the Dorsey Hotel, and he wasn't there. But they said they think he's going to a party tonight at Ann Lindsay's house. So we said, okay, we'll go out to Liberty City. Because it was supposed to be a party there at Ann Lindsay's house. So we got to Ann Lindsay's house, but it was too early for the party. So, but Miss Crosby said, she said, well, could we wait? She said, we'll sit in the kitchen, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So she said, oh, yeah. She said, yes, you could wait. So we went back there in the kitchen and we waited. We waited for him to come to the party. And that's, I have a picture. In fact, it was on the invitation that they sent out for my birthday. But with Joe Louis presenting me with this check for $200. We finally got the two. We had to run all over town.
Yeah.
Chasing Joe Louis
And he
to
finally
get the
came to the party.
$200. Yeah, the 200.
Persistence.
For 200 persistence.
Yeah.
All those things I learned.
Yes. So is there anything else
And
that you would like to...
but that goes back to Booker T. See, the Booker T experience, the exposure, you know, you have to learn how to express yourself. You need to learn how to sell yourself, sell what you're trying to do, and get other people to understand it. And the experience with the Miami Women's Club. There's so many experiences that we had at Booker T. Washington High School, even before integration. We helped with integration, even though it was illegal. We were integrating Miami, and because there was I was a part of the Christian Youth Council, which later became the National Council of Christians and Jews.
Okay.
And so we participated in that. So that gave me another kind of exposure. And
what work did you do there? What were you doing?
Well, with that, we had officers, president. I was the treasurer, but somebody, I really, they just had me down there in name, because they had a bookkeeper that was doing the work. But it was trying to show that we were working together, So, in a sense, Miami was like ahead of this whole desegregation effort. You could look at it that way when you look back at some of the things that we did. Even with the integration of getting Virginia Key Beach, even though the beach was segregated, it was an attempt to go to Haulover that brought about the segregated beach, because they didn't want us going to Haulover. Which was like progress, for us, because we had no beach to go to.
Sure.
So it still brought progress. And but we just I can't sing enough praises for Booker T. Washington High School, because it was a citadel of learning where we learned, and our teachers cared about us. They met with us, and this Miss Marie Roberts, for instance, the one that was a leader, integrating us all over the county. She didn't even have a car. But she used to get my father had a car, and she used to get him to take us to some of these meetings. So, I just have such fond memories, and that's, I give a scholarship every year in honor of my husband to a student from Booker T. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Because and then at Talladega College in Alabama, we had, and I went there in 1949, and they had white teachers, black teachers. But that was the first time I was taught by white people at Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama.
Okay. Why did you choose that school?
I chose because it was a liberal arts college, and my mother's friend, who was a teacher, sent her daughter there. But she recommended it highly to my mother. And, because my mother didn't know too much about what college or anything like that. She didn't know anything about college, but she wanted me to go to college. But which one to go to, she wanted to take the advice of an educated person. And this was a teacher who had sent her daughter to Talladega College. And Talladega College was founded by the American Missionary Association, and these are some of the people who also founded, like, Harvard University, and some of the Ivy League schools. And so she was telling my mother that I needed that kind of exposure, and I needed that kind of education. So my mother said yes, because I had a boyfriend who was going to FAMU, and I was saying that I wanted to go to I think I was thinking about going to FAMU, and my mother said, "No, you're going to Talladega."
That's a method that works.
So, but and I got involved in the Y, because I had been a Y teen at Booker T. So I got involved in the Y, and I remember we used to have the state meetings at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery.
Okay.
But this was before Dr. Martin Luther King became the pastor there.
Okay.
There was a Reverend Johns who was the pastor. And actually, he was the one that like prepared the way for Martin Luther King, because if he had not gotten those people prepared to do the bus boycott, you know, it would have been more difficult for Martin Luther King because people were scared.
Yeah.
And Connie Chung did a TV broadcast, a film on Reverend Johns. You don't hear anything about him, but actually he was the one that laid the foundation upon which Dr. Martin Luther King started his movement. And he used to come to Talladega. Reverend Johns used to come to Talladega to speak at our Sunday chapel service. And that was Talladega was just such a good experience for me, with another kind of high level exposure, you know, in the humanities and the social sciences. And I remember one time, even after interstate transportation, segregated transportation was outlawed, they were still segregating us on the train. We used to catch the train to come home, to go to Talladega and come back home. And of course, when we go to buy the ticket, they put you in car one, the first car, because they say that if the train derail, that's the first car that's going to be derailed. So they put the black people in car one. And so when we explained to our white teachers that they were still segregating us, I remember a Dr. Martha Gibson said, the next time you go home, when your parents send you money for your ticket, give it to me, and I'll buy your ticket for you. Oh. So I did that, and she bought the ticket. So when I got to the train station in Montgomery, I was in car. My ticket said I was supposed to go to car 5. And so when I got there, I showed him the ticket, and he looked at the ticket. I could see him like frowning, you know. And he said, "Just wait right here." So he went somewhere, and he was showing somebody else the ticket. You know, I guess he was trying to figure out how I got a ticket that said go to be in car 5.
Yeah.
And because they knew what they had been doing.
Yeah.
So they took that ticket around and whoever, I'm watching them, you know. So finally, I guess they decided to let me come into car 5. Because they probably didn't know whether that was a test case from the NAACP or what, you know.
Okay, yeah.
So they let me in a car 5, but I couldn't sit in the seat I was supposed to sit in. I had to sit in that back seat against the wall, where the motor is under it and all that, but it can't, and it won't recline. And so I knew what that experience was about. And then another experience I had there at Talladega, they built a new Y in Birmingham. And they was going to have the state meeting at the Y in Birmingham. Yeah. So we said we wanted to go to that meeting. And they said, well, okay, you can come, but you can't eat because it's against the law. So we said, okay, we'll fast. And what happened was when the white students heard that we couldn't eat and that we were fasting, they decided that they would fast also. So that was another experience, which was similar, not exactly the same, but I had that experience at the Miami Women's Club.
Yeah. Without the walk. Yeah.
I've gone through that before.
Yeah.
But Talladega was a very good experience for me because it gave me a good education that I could stand on, and exposed me to various experiences. I remember we used to have this for the various majors. They had what they call the extern
externship.
service.
Yep.
And we went, since I was in social science, we went to Washington, D.C., and we went to see, we asked to see Senator Sparkman from Alabama, and we also had a interview with Hugo Black. We went in his office and talked with him and you know, had that experience. So we had a lot of experiences that, you know, I still have under my belt. I still remember. Yeah, so I'm glad I went to Talladega because it's a good school. Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. Well, is there anything else that you would like to tell me? I know. We're at the end of my list. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I've talked out.
Are you?
But I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.